My jealous stepsister slept with my husband, stole my life, and now she wants me to bless her. My jealous stepsister slept with my husband, stole my life, and now she wants me to bless her wedding. Yes, you read that right. And here is the full story of how I got my revenge. My husband, Jerry male, 52, and I, female, 48, had been together for almost 12 years, married for 10 of them. In the beginning, it was like we were living in our own little bubble of happiness. Every moment together felt like a piece of a puzzle falling perfectly into place. We laughed over the dumbest jokes, dreamed about our future, and soaked in every little moment that made life together so special. We were a team, inseparable and strong. It felt like we could conquer anything as long as we were side by side. Our anniversaries were always a big deal. We celebrated every milestone with heartfelt gestures and laughter. Cozy Sundays were spent curled up on the couch, and spontaneous date nights became the highlight of our week. Life was simple but so full of joy, and we cherished every single second of it. I genuinely thought I had hit the jackpot with Jerry. He was my best friend and the love of my life. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. Slowly, things started to change. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable. Date nights felt a little less exciting, and the easy laughter we used to share was replaced by this awkward tension I couldn't quite put my finger on. I started noticing that Jerry was spending more and more time glued to his phone, and when I would ask him about it, he would brush it off like it was nothing. Our once carefree conversations began to feel strained. It was like he was present physically, but his mind was miles away. The intimacy we had, those little moments that made our relationship special, was fading, replaced by this growing distance that felt impossible to bridge. I tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, but deep down, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then the late-night phone calls started, mysterious messages that he would quickly hide or ignore, saying they were just work-related. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But my gut was screaming at me that this was more than just paranoia. I started to suspect the unthinkable. Jerry might be having an affair. Every fiber of my being hoped I was wrong, but I knew I had to find out the truth. One Friday evening, I decided to surprise him with a dinner date. I thought maybe we just needed to reconnect, to remind ourselves of the love we once shared. I was so excited. I even put on his favorite dress and headed to his office, envisioning a night that could reignite the spark between us. But as I waited in the parking lot, I received a message from him saying he was swamped with work and would be staying late. I sighed, disappointed but understanding. I was about to leave when something stopped me. Call it intuition or curiosity, but I decided to wait a little longer. And that was when I saw him. Jerry walked out of the office building, not looking stressed or tired, but relaxed. He got into his car and drove off, completely unaware that I was watching. My heart was pounding as I decided to follow him. I told myself it was probably nothing, that I was overreacting, but a part of me already knew I was about to uncover something that would change everything. I followed him to a bar across town. My chest tightened as I watched him walk in. Why would he lie about working late to go to a bar? My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them prepared me for what I was about to see. I parked a few spots away and walked in as discreetly as possible. And there he was, sitting at a table, smiling warmly. Across from him sat a woman with her back turned to me. At first, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe it was just a work thing after all. But then the woman turned her head and my world came crashing down. It was Karen, my stepsister Karen. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. My legs wobbled and I had to steady myself against the wall to keep from collapsing. Karen and Jerry were sitting there, holding hands like some lovesick teenagers. They laughed and gazed at each other like I never existed. Like our marriage was some distant memory. I felt sick to my stomach. The betrayal was so overwhelming that I thought I might actually throw up right there in the bar. I watched them for what felt like an eternity, paralyzed by a mix of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could they do this to me? Jerry, the man I had given my heart to, and Karen, my own stepsister, who had been part of my life since we were kids. I felt like my world was crumbling around me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Somehow I managed to pull myself together enough to leave before Jerry noticed me. That night, I cried harder than I ever had in my entire life. It felt like my heart had been ripped out and stomped on. The pain was unbearable. I kept replaying what I had seen over and over in my head, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. For some context, Karen is my stepsister because my parents divorced when I was very young, and my mom remarried a man named Harry. Karen was Harry's daughter from a previous marriage. We were never particularly close, but we tolerated each other for the sake of our parents. I never imagined in my wildest dreams that she would betray me like this. But this was only the beginning, because if Karen thought she could take everything from me and get away with it, she was dead wrong. Harry had a daughter from his previous marriage named Karen. At first, Karen and I got along surprisingly well despite our 4-year age gap. We would hang out, share jokes, and even talk about some of the drama in our lives. But as time went on, things began to change. It was a slow realization on my part, but I started noticing how Karen had a talent, a knack, really, for manipulation. She was the kind of person who could twist any situation to suit her needs, whether it was sweet-talking her way out of trouble with our parents or deceiving strangers without a second thought. Honestly, it was impressive in a deeply unsettling way. For reasons I could never fully understand, Karen was always jealous of me. Maybe it was because we both came from broken homes, and she felt like I had something she didn't. Or maybe it was just her nature. No matter what I did, no matter how much effort I put into trying to build a connection with her, I could never seem to win her over. As we grew older, the distance between us only widened. When I got a full-ride scholarship to college, I threw myself into that new chapter of my life. I made new friends, explored my interests, and savored the freedom of being on my own for the first time. Meanwhile, Karen and I drifted further apart. Eventually, we only saw each other at family events, and even then, I kept my distance. But Karen didn't let me off the hook so easily. Over the years, she continued to find ways to get under my skin. At every family gathering, she would make subtle, cutting remarks about my appearance, like how my outfit was an interesting choice, or how I might want to consider going to the gym. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to chip away at my confidence bit by bit. I tried my best to ignore her, to let her comments roll off my back, but it was exhausting. Karen's behavior didn't stop at me either. She had a way of being inappropriately friendly with the people I dated, making flirty comments that left me feeling uneasy. When I introduced my now husband, Jerry, to the family, Karen was no different. She'd make remarks about how lucky he was or how amazing he looked in his gym pictures. Jerry would always laugh it off, clearly uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to Karen just being Karen. It was frustrating, but I didn't think much of it, at least not until tonight. Tonight changed everything. I was out with some friends when I saw Karen and Jerry together at a pub. They weren't just chatting, they looked cozy, comfortable even, too comfortable. My heart sank as I watched them laugh and lean in close to each other, their body language making it clear that this wasn't the first time. When Jerry came home later that night, reeking of whiskey and sweat, I pretended to be asleep. He didn't even try to hide it. His brazen attitude sent a clear message. He thought he could get away with it. I stayed awake the entire night, my mind racing as I pieced everything together. The next morning, before Jerry woke up, I slipped his phone out of the bedroom and went through it. Messages, calls, emails, photos, I found all the proof I needed. My stomach turned as I documented everything on my own phone, taking screenshots and photos for safekeeping. After Jerry left for work, I drove straight to my mom's house. She was the only person I could trust to give me the comfort and support I desperately needed. When I told her what I had discovered, she was as shocked as I was. At first, she didn't believe it. How could she? Karen had always been like a daughter to her. But when I showed her the evidence, her shock turned to outrage. She couldn't understand how Karen, who she had loved and cared for, could do something so cruel. Together, we came up with a plan to confront Karen and Jerry in front of our family. My mom insisted on keeping it quiet until we had everyone gathered, and I agreed. On the day of the dinner, I played my part perfectly. I acted normal, laughing and chatting with everyone as if nothing was wrong. Karen and Jerry didn't suspect a thing. After dinner, as the wine flowed and people started to relax, I gave my mom a subtle nod. She stood up and went to get the projector we had set up earlier. I clinked my glass to get everyone's attention, my heart pounding in my chest. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "There's something I need to share with all of you." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. My voice was steady though, surprising even myself considering the storm of emotions raging inside me. "I've called you all here for a very specific reason," I began, scanning the room filled with family and close friends. Their faces showed curiosity, concern, even a bit of impatience. They didn't know what was coming. "There's something I've been grappling with for a while now," I continued, my hands trembling slightly as I gestured towards the projector. "I need you all to pay attention to this." My mom had helped set up the projector earlier, and now the device stood in the middle of the room, a silent accomplice to the truth I was about to reveal. She gave me a subtle nod, her expression calm yet supportive, as though telling me I could do this. I connected it to my phone and started scrolling through the gallery, the images I had collected sitting heavy like stones in my chest. This was it. No turning back now. The first image flashed onto the screen, and the room fell into an almost deafening silence. A picture of Jerry, my husband, and Karen, my stepsister, caught in an intimate pose. Gasps erupted, followed by whispers and murmurs that rippled like shockwaves through the room. Confusion was etched on everyone's faces. Eyes darted between the screen and me, searching for some kind of explanation.
"This is not easy for me to say," I continued, my voice unwavering despite the tears threatening to spill. "But I felt that you all needed to know the truth." I paused for a moment, glancing at Jerry and Karen. Their expressions were frozen, Jerry's face red and flushed, Karen looking pale and small, a far cry from her usual manipulative confidence. I took another breath and spoke the words that had been weighing me down for weeks. These pictures and messages are evidence of an affair between my husband, Jerry, and my stepsister, Karen. The room exploded. Disbelief, anger, and shock filled every corner as people erupted into responses. My mom's face was a mask of fury and heartbreak, her lips pressed into a tight line. She stood next to me, holding my hand firmly, silently letting me know she was there for me. I scrolled through more messages, each one more damning than the last. The air grew heavier with every passing second. Conversations halted, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into outright outrage. The betrayal laid bare was too much for anyone to ignore. Jerry sat motionless, his jaw tight, while Karen buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as if to hide from the reality unfolding around her. My mom finally stepped forward, her voice like a knife slicing through the chaos. "How could you do this to our family, to your own spouse, to your sister?" Her words were sharp, and her eyes bore into Jerry and Karen like lasers. My stepdad, sitting across the room, stared at Karen with quiet intensity. "Is this true?" he asked her, his voice heavy with disappointment. Karen broke down at his words, sobbing uncontrollably, her composure finally shattered. One by one, other family members began voicing their own disbelief, their own outrage. Some shook their heads in anger, others whispered furiously to one another. The air was electric, vibrating with the collective emotions of everyone present. I turned to face Jerry and Karen, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. "I didn't bring you all here just to expose them," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But also to let you know that I will be divorcing Jerry. If Karen wants him, she can have him. I'm done." More gasps followed, but this time there was a sense of solidarity in the room. My friends and family began offering their support, their voices rising above the chaos to comfort me. Some approached me with hugs, others with words of encouragement. Jerry's face was beet red. Unable to handle the humiliation, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Karen hesitated for a moment before rushing after him, her sobs echoing down the hallway. When they were gone, my mom pulled me into a tight hug. That was when the dam broke. All the pain, the hurt, the betrayal I had bottled up for so long came rushing out in waves of tears. I cried in her arms, letting the exhaustion of the past few weeks finally spill over. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Emotionally drained, I struggled to get out of bed most mornings. Sleep became both my escape and my torment, offering fleeting relief but no true solace. The divorce process was grueling, but I knew I couldn't stay tethered to Jerry any longer. After months of back-and-forth legal proceedings, the court finally granted the divorce 2 days ago. It felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. My mom and I spent the day celebrating in the simplest way, shopping for little things and eating ice cream at our favorite spot. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. Free from the lies, free from the betrayal, free to finally start living for myself. That evening started like any other. We were all gathered in the living room at my mom's place, a movie playing in the background while we half-watched and chatted about nothing in particular. It felt peaceful, even comforting in a way I hadn't felt in a while. Then, out of nowhere, my stepdad walked in, and the look on his face immediately killed the mood. He wasn't just upset. He looked downright worried, like someone had told him the house was about to collapse. My mom, who has this knack for picking up on the tiniest shifts in energy, instantly asked him what was wrong. Instead of answering her, though, he turned to me with this weird, almost sympathetic look that made my stomach drop. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting up straight, my voice already laced with unease. He hesitated for a second before asking, "Have you seen what Karen posted on Facebook?"
Now, for context, Karen is my stepsister, and while we've had our fair share of drama, nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. I shook my head, pulled out my phone, and began typing her name into the search bar. My fingers felt clumsy as I scrolled to her profile, not even sure what I was looking for. And there it was, her latest post. A photo of her and Jerry smiling like they were the stars of some Hallmark movie. But it wasn't just the picture that got me. It was the caption, "So happy to be engaged." My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it. And then, as if to twist the knife deeper, I noticed the ring on her finger. I couldn't even process it. My brain froze. My heart felt like it had been yanked out of my chest and stomped on. My mom, who had been watching me closely, snatched my phone out of my hands before I could react. She gasped, and I could see the disbelief wash over her face as she realized what I was looking at. "She's getting married? To Jerry?" she asked, her voice rising with a mix of shock and anger. I barely registered what happened after that. The air felt thick, like the walls were closing in. I sank back into the couch, staring blankly at the TV, which was still playing some random scene from the movie. My mom tried to comfort me, but I couldn't even hear her properly. It was like my mind was drowning in a whirlpool of emotions: betrayal, anger, disbelief. Then, as if the universe hadn't already done enough damage, my stepdad's phone started ringing. It was Karen. Of course it was Karen. She was probably calling to gush about her engagement, blissfully unaware of the emotional grenade she had just dropped on me. "Put it on speaker," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My stepdad gave me a hesitant look but nodded and answered the call. Karen's voice was chirpy, almost annoyingly cheerful, as she launched into how happy she was, how amazing Jerry was, and how thrilled she felt to be marrying him. Every word felt like a slap to my face. I sat there frozen, as my chest tightened. Then my stepdad, bless him, finally snapped. His voice was calm but laced with anger as he said, "Karen, what you have done today is not just insensitive, it's incredibly hurtful. You have caused so much pain to your stepsister and you don't even seem to care. This isn't just about you and Jerry. Your actions affect the whole family." Karen, sounding defensive, shot back, "I don't understand why everyone's making such a big deal out of this. Jerry and I are in love. What's so wrong with celebrating that?" My stepdad didn't hold back. "What's wrong is that you had an affair with him, Karen. You knew what you were doing, and now you're flaunting it without a second thought about how it might hurt other people, especially your stepsister. Do you even understand how cruel that is?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears streamed down my face as my mom wrapped her arms around me, trying to shield me from the storm of emotions crashing over me. Karen must have realized I was there because she suddenly asked, "Wait, is she in the room?"
"Yes, she is," my stepdad replied coldly.
Karen immediately tried to switch gears, her tone turning apologetic, or at least pretending to be. "I need to talk to her," she said, almost pleading.
My stepdad looked at me, and for some reason I nodded. He handed me the phone and I held it to my ear, my hands trembling. "What do you want, Karen?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She didn't miss a beat.
"Look, I know this is hard for you, but Jerry and I are happy. We're in love. You and he are officially separated now, so I don't see why you're upset."
I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and then, as if she hadn't already said enough, she dropped another bombshell. "We'd really like for you to come to the wedding. It would mean so much to us if you could give a speech, to show everyone you're okay with us being together." For a second, I thought I misheard her. She wanted me to give a speech? At their wedding? To bless their relationship? I couldn't even respond. The audacity left me completely speechless. Before I could say anything, my mom snatched the phone from my hands. Her voice was sharp, unwavering, as she said, "Karen, this is a new low. Even for you. Do you honestly expect her to celebrate this? To act like everything is fine after what you've done?" Karen, unshaken, argued back, "But we're in love. Jerry and I are meant to be together, and I won't apologize for that. You all just need to accept it." And that was it. That was the moment I realized there was no reasoning with her. The whole situation felt like some twisted soap opera I never signed up for, and I was just the unwilling protagonist. After the bombshell revelation about Karen's betrayal, I left my parents to deal with her and retreated to the guest bedroom. Once inside, I locked the door, sat down on the edge of the bed, and let myself break down. The tears came in waves, a mixture of anger, humiliation, and heartbreak that left me gasping for breath. I buried my face in the pillow, screaming silently into the fabric to avoid giving Karen the satisfaction of hearing me crack. That night is a blur in my memory, a mix of exhaustion and emotional overload. I do not remember falling asleep, but at some point I must have, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was creeping through the curtains. The morning brought a strange sense of clarity. My head was pounding, my eyes swollen from crying, but beneath the wreckage of my emotions, there was something new. Anger, sharp and unrelenting. The audacity of Karen's actions wasn't just hurtful, it was infuriating. It felt as though she had taken a torch to my life and danced around the flames. But if she thought I was going to sit there, wallow, and let her get away with it, she had another thing coming. That anger lit a fire inside me, one I had not felt in years. I decided then and there that I was not going to let her win. If she wanted to play games, I would show her how the game was really played. Instead of letting this revelation destroy me, I resolved to turn the tables. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to come out on top. As the plan began to form in my mind, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing since the whole mess began. I was determined to make Karen regret ever inviting me into her life, let alone her engagement party. I grabbed my laptop, my hands trembling with adrenaline, and began scrolling through Karen's social media profiles. Years of oversharing played to my advantage as I combed through every photo, every post, every tagged location. I clicked through albums of smiling selfies, beach vacations, and overly curated brunch shots, searching for the weak spot I knew had to be there. It felt like a scavenger hunt of sorts, one where I was hunting for the perfect weapon to use against her. And then, like a gift from the universe, I found it. A photo from several years ago, buried in the depths of her tagged pictures. There it was, Karen and Ron, her ex-boyfriend from college. The caption read something cheesy like, "Love of my life forever," and I felt my lips curl into a satisfied smirk. I remembered Ron, how Karen had once bragged endlessly about their passionate, dramatic relationship, how she had cried for weeks after their messy breakup. And then, of course, the tattoo. Karen had literally tattooed Ron's name on her body. It was the kind of breakup that left scars, emotional, and in her case, physical. The plan crystallized in my mind almost too perfectly. I closed my laptop with a decisive snap and went to find my parents. I needed to pitch my idea, and for this to work, I needed at least one of them on board. Over coffee at the kitchen table, I laid it all out. I told them that I would be attending Karen and Jerry's engagement party, but I wouldn't be going alone. No, I had a very special plus one in mind, Ron. As I spoke, I saw my mom's eyes widen in realization. For a moment, she looked torn, part of her wanting to intervene, part of her clearly relishing the poetic justice. My stepfather, on the other hand, was less impressed. "Is this really necessary?" he asked, rubbing his temples as though the drama was giving him a headache. "You're just going to escalate things. Do you really want to stoop to her level?"
I'm not stooping to her level, I replied coolly. She went after my husband. I'm just returning the favor.
My mom exchanged a glance with me, her expression unreadable. Finally, she gave me a subtle nod of approval. She understood. She knew this wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity. So, Reddit, here I am. I have my plan, my accomplice. Ron is totally on board, by the way. And the engagement party is a week away. I'll admit, there's a part of me that feels like I might be pushing it too far, but at the same time, I can't shake the satisfaction I feel just imagining Karen's face when she sees us walk in together. Am I the a-hole for bringing her ex to the engagement party after she slept with my husband and decided to marry him? Or is this exactly the kind of justice she deserves?
Update 1.
2 days since I last posted an update on my story, and honestly, I am still processing all the responses. First of all, thank you to everyone who took the time to comment. I did not expect so much support, and honestly, it caught me off guard to see how many people understand where I am coming from, even if my actions might come across as petty to some. I appreciate the validation though, because this situation has been anything but easy to navigate. I will admit, when all of this started, I had every intention of taking the high road. I wanted to be the bigger person and just let it go. But the more I saw Karen post engagement picture after engagement picture with Jerry on social media, the harder it became to stick to that mindset. Watching them flaunt their happiness while knowing what they did to me felt like a slap in the face every single time I opened my feed. Eventually, I realized that I could not sit idly by while they got to celebrate their happily ever after at my expense. That is when I decided to act. So here's what I did. I sent a friend request to Ron on Facebook. For context, Ron is Karen's ex, the one she dated for years before she moved on to Jerry. To my surprise, he accepted the request pretty quickly. I was not sure if he would even remember me, but when I messaged him to introduce myself properly, he responded. It felt a little surreal, but we started talking. I made sure to be upfront with him right away. I told him who I was, Karen's stepsister and Jerry's ex-wife. I did not want to beat around the bush or play games. I also told him exactly why I was reaching out to him, which was, of course, my plan to bring him as my +1 to Karen and Jerry's wedding. At first, Ron seemed a bit skeptical, which was understandable. I mean, it is not every day that someone you vaguely know reaches out to you with such a bizarre proposition. He asked me a lot of questions, mostly about my motives and what I was hoping to achieve by doing this. I laid it all out for him, the whole ugly truth. I told him how Karen had cheated with Jerry while Jerry was still my husband, how she had completely shattered my life, and how she and Jerry were now tying the knot as if nothing had happened. I explained that this was not just about revenge, but about making her understand, even for a moment, what it feels like to be betrayed and humiliated in front of the people you care about. I will not lie, there was a moment when I thought he was going to decline. But after hearing everything, Ron eventually agreed to go along with it. He admitted he was curious to see how it would all play out, and to be honest, I think he might have a bit of a score to settle with Karen as well. It is not my place to dig into his past with her, but let us just say I got the sense that he was not entirely over the way things ended between them. Now, here is where things stand. The wedding is in a few days, and I feel a strange mix of excitement and nerves. I cannot wait to see the looks on Karen and Jerry's faces when they realize who I brought as my date. That moment alone will be worth everything. My stepdad, however, would probably disapprove if he knew. The last time we talked, he strongly discouraged me from bringing Ron, saying it would just stir up unnecessary drama. But I have decided to keep this little detail to myself for now. It is not like I owe anyone an explanation, especially after what I have been through. So that is where I am at. Everything is in place, and now I just have to wait for the big day. I will be sure to post another update after the wedding. Stay tuned. This is going to be one for the books. Update 2. I would have shared this earlier, but life threw me a curveball and I needed time to process everything before putting it into words. But as promised, here is how things unfolded at Karen and Jerry's wedding. On the big day, I decided to face the chaos head on. I dressed in an outfit that screamed confidence, not for Karen or Jerry, but for myself. Ron, my chosen +1, accompanied me. We walked in together, arm in arm, turning heads. The moment Jerry caught sight of us, his jaw practically hit the floor. The recognition was instant. He knew exactly who Ron was. The tension in his expression was priceless, but we pretended not to notice and made our way to our seats with an air of practiced indifference. Jerry, however, was not one to let it slide. He approached me with his face twisted in barely contained anger and hissed, "Why would you bring him here?" I met his rage with a calm smile and replied, "Why not?" He had no choice but to return to the altar, his frustration evident in every step. When Karen made her entrance, the room stood to welcome her. Dressed in her bridal glory, she looked every bit the picture of triumph, until her eyes landed on me. At first, she gave me her signature victorious grin. But then she noticed Ron. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, she was frozen mid-step. My smirk deepened, and I could feel the weight of her confusion. Her eyes darted back and forth between me and him, trying to process the situation. My stepdad, escorting her down the aisle, gave her a nudge to keep moving, but it was as if she was rooted to the floor. The room buzzed with whispers, the tension mounting with every passing second. Finally, Karen abandoned the facade and stormed toward me, her face a storm of anger and disbelief. She stopped a mere foot away, glaring at me like she was trying to set me on fire with her eyes. "What the hell is this?" she spat, her voice low but venomous. I maintained my composure, leaning in slightly. "This? Oh, this is Ron, my +1, I said, letting my voice carry just enough satisfaction to needle her. "You remember him, right? From college? Or should I remind you about that tattoo you two got together?" Karen's face turned crimson, her anger bubbling to the surface. Ron, ever the composed one, took a step forward and said in a measured tone, "Karen, it's been a long time. We thought we'd join in celebrating your special day." "Celebrate?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You call this celebrating? You are ruining everything!" By now, the entire room was watching, their whispers growing louder. I decided to give Karen exactly what she deserved. "Karen," I said, my voice steady, "you invited me to your wedding. I just thought I'd make it memorable. Besides, what happens between Ron and me is none of your concern. You have Jerry now, don't you?" Her fury was palpable, her fists clenched so tightly I thought she might hurl her bouquet at me. And she did. The bouquet flew through the air, scattering petals before hitting the floor with a dramatic thud. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Karen stormed out, her dress billowing behind her like a furious storm cloud. The door slammed shut, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Jerry, flustered and red-faced, attempted to confront me, but my mother stepped in, her voice slicing through the tension. "Do not even think about raising your voice after what you've done," she said, shutting him down with a single glare. I turned to Ron and whispered, "Let's get out of here." He nodded, and we left, heads held high. As we stepped outside, the weight of everything lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. The world had seen my strength, my resilience, and the truth of what I had endured. People can think what they want, but I never betrayed anyone or destroyed a marriage. I simply gave Karen a taste of her own medicine, and for that, I have no regrets. Update 3. I honestly did not expect this kind of overwhelming response since my last update. The sheer number of comments and messages has left me completely blown away. It is comforting to know that so many of you understand why I made the choices I did, even if they were not exactly conventional. Of course, I also appreciate the critical feedback from those who disagree with me. At the end of the day, I realized my actions were not perfect, and not everyone is going to see things the way I do. But here's the thing, I do not regret what I did, not one bit. For those who are curious about the fallout, here's the tea. My stepdad told me that Jerry and Karen have officially broken up. Yes, the wedding is completely off. From what I've heard, Karen flat out refused to go through with it, no matter how much Jerry begged and pleaded. Apparently, seeing Ron again that day brought back a wave of emotions for her, feelings that she might not have fully dealt with. Honestly, I can't say I am surprised. It seems like she was still holding on to some unresolved feelings for Ron, and witnessing him in that moment must have been like opening an old wound. I am not the kind of person who takes joy in other people's pain, but let's be real. Sometimes life has a way of delivering lessons in the harshest ways possible. Maybe, just maybe, this is one of those times. As for Jerry, he has been blowing up my phone with angry missed calls and text messages. He is clearly furious, but I have decided to block him. I refuse to engage with his toxic energy right now. My stepdad, on the other hand, was not thrilled with my actions at the wedding. He gave me a pretty stern lecture about how I handled things, and while I could have argued back, I chose not to. Out of respect for him, and honestly, for the sake of my own peace, I kept my mouth shut and let him vent. My mom has asked me to give him some time and space to cool off, and I agreed. At the end of the day, they are still my family, and I want to maintain whatever balance I can in our relationship.
In the meantime, I've been reflecting a lot on everything that happened and where I want to go from here. If there is one thing this entire mess has taught me, it's that I need to prioritize myself for once. I've spent so much time trying to navigate everyone else's chaos that I kind of lost sight of my own needs and happiness. That stops now. I am finally choosing to focus on rebuilding my life brick by brick, one step at a time. I know many of you have recommended therapy, and you are absolutely right. It is long overdue, but I am going to take that step and start therapy. There are so many emotions I need to untangle and a lot of personal growth I need to work on. Beyond that, I am rediscovering my passions, the hobbies and interests that make me feel alive, and actively surrounding myself with positive influences. Life is unpredictable, and while I do not know what the future holds, I am determined to face it head-on with a clearer mind and an open heart.
Thank you all again for your support, your advice, and even your criticism. This community has been like a sounding board for me, and I genuinely appreciate every single one of you who has taken the time to read and respond. Here's to brighter days ahead.